So actually, totally unrelated question then. When it comes to cons, so you guys have gone to cons now as artist and writer, as exhibitors. I'm assuming you guys have gone to cons or many cons as fans. Um, for you guys, what is the best cons to go to as a fan, but also as a creator? So that way, if someone else is trying to make a comic, they can sort of take some knowledge from you guys.
I would say that so from my personal experience, I never went to cons until this whole thing started, and it was never really on my radar. I mean, I've weaved in and out of comic books throughout my life. I've always been there, ever present, but definitely periods in my life where I liked them a lot more, or they just weren't priority or whatever it happens to be. So honestly, for me, it's been great because with the cons, because I've just been loving them, because that's one, we get a chance to see a lot of friends and learn from creators and see all the amazing things that are going out there, and then being exhibitors as well. It's just been, we love doing it. We miss it so much. It's like obviously the year of things missing, but that's one thing that we absolutely is leaving the hole in our hearts in terms of just being able to talk to people. I mean, yeah, selling the book is obviously awesome, but like it's just the interactions. It's us hanging out together too, having fun, and because we've been at this for a couple of years now, there's a community that we're familiar with, and so it's just catching up with old friends, and it's great. And then on top of that, as I learn more about the comics industry and I learn more about creators and Jason's been always feeding me excellent material to read or things to check out, I get really excited because sometimes those folks are at the shows. I'm like, oh, great, I can go and see this person and talk to them. But I would say, in terms of from our own comic book perspective, for us, we've gone to a couple. There's the CAFs, like the Comic Arts Festivals, and then there's the cons, which are a little more superhero focused and maybe that kind of area. And I think for what we do, what we're trying to do with the education piece, certainly, and getting this book into libraries and those kinds of things, the Comic Arts Festivals have been like a very natural space for us to be in with Group of Seven Comics. We've been able. They're usually held in free public spaces like libraries, in which we're big champions of. So we obviously enjoy that element, and it brings in a different crowd too. It brings in a much more of a younger crowd, I would say. And Jason and I both have young kids, so we're super comfortable in that element. And it gives people a chance to kind of explore the medium without it being FANEXPO. And don't get me wrong, I love FANEXPO. Like I went when we were there last year exhibiting, it was my first time actually going to FANEXPO as a fan or anything. I loved it. I had an amazing time. but it's such a different experience than going to a library show. And although I should say that if like Toronto Comic Arts Festival, which is like incredible, is just as busy as in terms of being packed into a space. Yeah. But we've just kind of, we've been to a few, and this year we had a bunch lined up, and like Montreal, we were planning to be at Montreal for MCAF in person, and so we're starting to identify those shows where we think that our book can actually, maybe resonate a little further and go a little further towards building that audience up. So I think we love all those kinds of shows. I think for us though. At least in our experiences, the CAF seem to be the more natural element, although the cons have a lot more people sometimes, so we like going to those too. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple 10,000 compared to 100 to 1,000, or sometimes the higher end ones. Yeah, I've seen them go higher than that, but yeah. It's actually an important question then for both of you guys, talking about promoting your book and getting your book out there. How can people get your book?
Do you want to go ahead?
www.group7comics.ca is where you can go to buy our book. Truthfully speaking, though, if you message us through any social media, we'll respond with the link and make those arrangements happen. And there have been a couple people that have, just sent a message to me over Facebook or Instagram, and we will make it happen, because though like the sales can keep you busy. We're not bombarded with so many messages that we can't keep track. We're able to keep track. We can manage it between the two of us. We can do this. We're a good team.
We got a spreadsheet. It's okay.
We have a Google form.
Love it.
We have a Google form, spreadsheet, so we can manage it. The best way to do it is truthfully just to go to www.group7comics.ca and order it there. And Chris and I are pretty prompt on replies within usually a couple hours, unless it's the middle of the night. And then we send books out regularly, and that's the best way probably to get them.
Perfect.
And our social media is at Group of 7 Comics. So Group of 7 number 7 Comics. So, and that's on all the platforms except TikTok, which we're not on yet.
Yeah,
but
I still don't know what TikTok is.
It's a place for us to dance.
Yes,
I have no idea. I'm too old for the TikTok.
Well, as someone who frequents it, unfortunately, I must say you are not too old for the TikTok. I think you would look great doing some of the dances on there, Jason. Not to worry there.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and on your website, I assume have you guys gone the digital route as well? So if someone in like Arkansas is like, you know what, this could be a cool book to read, can they get it digitally?
Yes. Go ahead.
Well,
please.
Okay, I was going to say yes. But they actually are currently unavailable digitally at the moment because we're actually as part of putting the graphic novel together, the trade paperback. A whole bunch of new art was produced, and so because of that, we want to update the new digital files. So we did have our old digital files available for free up the last 5 or 6 months. Those just been taken down in preparation for putting up new digital files that are representative of the actual completed work. And yeah, so that's kind of where we are. Not to say that people in Arkansas haven't gotten in touch, not Arkansas specifically, but we've shipped out the trade to California and Utah and Michigan, and and the best part about it is, I find it is, we'll get an order, and I'll be like, who is this person? And I'll email them back, say, hey, here are the details, and I'll just say, how did you hear about us? Like, how did you hear about this book that we're only really in the Greater Toronto Southwestern area, and often it's through social media. And then the best responses I get are people just like, I just like Canadian things. I'm like, well, then this book is for you.
Great. That's awesome. I was going to say, I imagine it would be a lot of people into World War culture or something like that, but hey, if
I think so too.
Canadians, great.
Yeah. Along those lines, I was in touch with a store in West Virginia, and I asked them if they would consider, carrying some copies of the book. And they flat out said, we've got a whole bunch of people in the area that are fans of World War I and II material, and we're sure they'd love to read it. So, dropped them off there.
Sweet.
That was kind of fun.
That's awesome.
We are officially carried in the States.
Four Color Fantasies. What's that, Chris?
Awesome.
I say we're officially carried in the States.
It is
we're officially cross-bordered. It is internationally selling book.
Yeah, shout outs to Four Color Fantasies in West Virginia. They were super nice guys.
Sure.
Awesome.
For sure.
I'll make sure to throw some tags up for your website as well as theirs, so that our friends down south can go get it.
Please do. Thank you.
Now, I did want to ask sort of two questions. On, I believe it was your Instagram, Jason, I'd seen you guys had orders from people in the local area, and I believe you were hand delivering them. Is that right?
Yeah, man. Why not?
Love it.
We had enough orders in sort of pre-orders, and right up to the last minute orders as well that were not far from each other. And I love driving, and I love coffee, and I love podcasts. And it was a chance for me to combine all those things together and drop off copies at some houses. And I was happy to do it. And that's the whole story. True story. And I would do it again, truthfully. If people order and they're enough in an enclosed area, like a sort of a centralized area, I'm happy to go drop them off. Sometimes if you're already getting in the car and going to the post office, what's another hour?
Yeah, really.
It's fine.
Especially if
It's
you're not
fine.
going to
Chris did the
discount.
same thing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. I
right.
did
Chris
the
did the
same
same
thing,
thing. He
and
just
we
didn't
had
post about it.
number of orders here in the Guelph and Kitchener Waterloo area, and I just packed the car up and went for a drive. And it was
Awesome.
great. I mean, yeah, it's a one thing. Actually, if we were in a different time, I think absolutely we would have found a way to do it together. We just take a Saturday, and we would have just met somewhere, and we
Right.
probably would have driven all around Ontario just dropping off books.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
super cool.
We do. It would be a lot of fun. At the same time, Conrad, we offered a tier in the pre-order that was to purchase the book, if and no shipping if you think that we're going to kind of run into you at shows. So we would bring a stack of pre-ordered trades to a show if we know we're going to see so and so, or if we think we pass them in our regular travels. And of course, when COVID-19 hit, all those opportunities to just see people in passing disappeared. We're not going to, so we're either going to eat the money for the shipping, which is fine, not a big deal, or just drop it off and eat the money in gas, and that's fine too. And it's just you're going to get it one way or the other. But we still wanted to get the books out to the people without having to say, "Hey, do you mind paying for shipping?" Because they're not that far. I love driving around. It was a nice day, and I almost missed a Leaf playoff game, which turned out to be completely meaningless now looking back.
I was gonna say.
Man, since they've been out of the playoffs, since they got disqualified from the qualifying round, my life has gotten so much less stressful. It's yeah, like lost 15 pounds. It's been wonderful. I love it. I'm very happy. Yeah.
And actually, something you'd said earlier, Chris, regarding digital copies where you're updating them. On Jason, your Instagram as well, I've seen you've replaced a lot of the word bubbles with a digital word bubble, correct, or panel?
Oh, yeah. I did the first two issues. Okay, again, you're learning this as you go. So the first time we released the digital prologue, I had hand lettered and did the word balloons by hand, and had never done any research as to how to do it well. And it was bad. It was bad. So when we did the first issue to print, I had gone back and I found out, at least, on Photoshop, I could literally paint over the words, or I should say digitally paint over the words, and then letter them to the best of my ability, which was bad. So the first two issues came out, and I'm at that same Guelph Comics Jam. Another creator came up to me and looked at my book and was like, "Hey, cool, it's me, Jason. Like, nice to see you again, and that's cool. Who does your lettering?" And I was like, and he says, "Yeah, you got to get some new fonts. You got to figure this out. Check out this resource." And he told me to go to blambot.com. Great resource. So I went there and I picked a couple new fonts and looked over their page and took some things in and fixed it for issue 3 a little bit, and issue 4 and 5 and 6. And I think, I refresh once in a while, learn a little more here or there. And then after we finished issue 6, I really looked over as many resources as I could for online for lettering to get more support there. And I learned more about spacing between lines and shapes of balloons and things like that. And it was like, oh, I know how to do this. I at least, whether I know how to do it well or not, it's not up for debate, because I'm willing to concede. But at least I can proceed with confidence, feeling like I know what I'm doing enough to take it to the next level. And so when we're doing the redigitizing everything for the trade, I went through and cleaned up as much of the word balloon action as I could. And for the first 2 issues where I had hand drawn the word balloons, there was no art underneath the hand drawn balloon, right? Like,
Yeah.
so if I think a bubble needs to be moved, I can erase it and I can simulate what should be behind it, but I had to generate some new imagery behind where those balloons were, and then try and place them for flow. I was making a lot of bad choices about what was okay to cover up and crowding the space between characters. Like, one of the things that I learned was to not interrupt the eye line between characters that are speaking to each other with a word balloon. And it makes perfect sense. Like, it adds the flow, it connects the characters together in the scene. And so I had to, rethink, okay, where am I going to place these balloons so I'm not interrupting those eye lines? Because in many scenes I did. And so you make the changes as best you can. And I did I think a decent job improving the work that was already there with the knowledge I had at the time of redoing the books. Now, in a year, I want to redo them. No, I'm just joking. It's like an endless cycle. The more you learn, the more you need to change, from your past. But you don't get to go backwards very often. So I got the chance to go backwards during COVID and fix what I could. And I'm very happy with the results. It really, I think, elevates the product significantly, having the updated lettering and spacing, and the font work is much better.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So when that's finished, do you think, guys, it'll be released for digital within a couple months? Will it be like a full year kind of deal? Is there a rough timeline?
It's done. It's done. The only issue that I've been having, the thing that's been getting in my way, is getting the file size for each page small enough without generating too many digital artifacts that that muddy up the imagery. So I burned out towards the start of the print run. On the book, I just burned out on how much I could look at those pages again and play with the DPI on each page. I was like, I wasn't getting success after looking after a good 5 months of every day 12 hours kind of staring at my computer screen, and it was just enough. So I took a break from it. I obviously need to get back to it, but I had a break today. I didn't do any comic book work today, so maybe I'll just look at those tomorrow. But there's just been some technical obstacles to overcome. But we're talking about half a day's work in the very near future. It's not months away. It's just days away.
Perfect.
And then we already have a number of mechanisms to host. So not only do we have we host them on our own Gumroad digital site, which is where people were before, but we're also involved with an indie comics digital publisher in the States called SpinWiz. So another shout out to an American partner supporter of ours. Who their whole game is promoting indie comics digitally, and so for us it's been great because I think they're based out of Charlotte. So they have some Canadian content, but again, it's just exposure to a whole new audience, and they were hosting our books too. So it's we had those avenues kind of already set up, so we can just kind of hit play and go.
Beautiful. Now we are getting close to our end of our 60 minutes to keep it within time for you guys. So I had one very specific question for Chris that I wanted to ask you. So as a part of everything going on with the world, with BLM and everything in the States and how that's affecting the world, it is very, very important that, unlike what culturally Canadians have done in the past, we are respectful. And one of the things that I had read through while doing research on you, Chris, was you actually reached out to the family of, I'm going to say this wrong, Francis PEGAHMAGABOW?
Sounds good.
Perfect.
Good stuff.
And you actually said, hey, you explained to them what's going on, and asked basically for permission for you to use their, well, I believe it was, you spoke with his great-great-granddaughter, correct?
His great-granddaughter, yeah.
Great-granddaughter.
Yeah, Julia, yeah.
Okay, and you actively asked for permission, but I heard she gave you some feedback as well. Is that correct?
She did. She shared the script with as many PEGAHMAGABOW family members as she could. And some had some thoughts on some dialogue, and some had some thoughts on motivation, and we incorporated those in the book. And at the end of the day, so when I was putting the script together, originally the genesis of the idea is around 2014. It's the centennial of the First World War. Obviously, because of my work, I'm thinking about this. We're thinking about it for my own professional spaces, but also thinking of all these Canadians who served. And I actually I'd never heard the story of Francis PEGAHMAGABOW. And at that time, especially at that point with the centenary, he got a lot more. There's a lot more interest in his legacy and his contributions. They right around that time they erected a statue. He's from the Parry Sound area. There's a big statue of him now out there as well. When he returned from the war, he became chief and was obviously was an Indigenous rights activist as well. And so anyway, so I started listening to the story, and then we started looking at his performance as a soldier, and he's the most highly decorated Indigenous soldier in the First World War, highly, the most deadly sniper of all combatants in the First World War. And then you start learning more about him. He wouldn't even have a spotter. He'd just go off into no man's land for 3 days and then come back. And you just all these things that are just not only fascinating from a historical perspective and impactful, but also feed as well in the comic narrative of what we're trying to do to put the story together. And so at that time too, which was the recommendations and the Truth and Reconciliation were coming out as well. And so as part of that process, I was pretty hyper aware of people who look like me telling stories, certainly of Indigenous people, without any contribution, without any conversation, without anything. And that's been part of that's part of the narrative of Canadian history. And so because of that, I really wanted to reach out to the family and say, hey, look, I really want to include this guy in the book. Here are my intentions. Here's what we're trying to do, and I'd like permission to use. And so it took about 6 months and back and forth. And actually, I shouldn't even say it was my idea initially. I had the thought to do it, and instead I had reached out to a Canadian publisher I had a script of issue 1, and I said I'd really like to talk to an Indigenous comics creator. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to talk to. And she said, "Oh, we'll reach out to this person. Her name was Elizabeth Laponce. I think she's in Minnesota. Oh, do you know Elizabeth Laponce, or do you know the name? Or
I don't know. I
yeah.
The name. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I reached out, and she said, "Hey, yep, I get what you're doing. What you need to do is reach out to the family, because the family, like the PEGAHMAGABOW family, is still very active and has a large role within that Anishinaabe community." And so I said, "Okay." So I reached out. And then it kind of went back and forth. Didn't hear much. We found her email address or reached out through Facebook. I think Facebook, okay. And then got the email address. And then we were about a month away from starting the art, and we still hadn't heard. And so I kind of had a backup plan if they had said they didn't want to. They were not comfortable using him, because I also knew. So again, I don't want to sound like we're. We were prescient of like the impact Group of 7 would have, but we knew the spaces it would go into. Like we were pretty, whether it was schools, whether it was like I'm in Guelph, you can't swing anything without a John McCrae reference out here, like and so I knew there would be local interest. Like I just knew there would be, and within us launching our Twitter page, within a week we had interviews on CBC and local press, and so we knew. So as part of that, we're like, let's do our due diligence. Let's try and put our best foot forward when it comes to this, especially given the context we were in and what was happening in Canada at that time. And so on top of that, so we reached out, and it was coming to the wire where they hadn't said anything. So we kind of prodded again and said, hey, if you don't want to, that's cool. But then she said, no, I've shared it. And then she said something really interesting to me. She said, listen, we really appreciate you reaching out and having the dialogue, but Francis actually doesn't belong to us. He's part of history. We appreciate that you included us in a conversation. I think their contributions absolutely improved the character and little bits and pieces there. I had a line in there about going into Parry Sound for candy on the weekends, and they wrote no. There's way better stuff on the reserve, which was like maple taffy. Like it's just like really. So we were able to kind of like incorporate some of those pieces. And so anyway, so he belongs to history, and so go right ahead or whatever, and so we did, and there was even a time where we thought of adding dialogue for him beyond what I had written, and I actually reached out to his great grandson, who's a university prof in Manitoba, I believe.
Cool.
And he couldn't help us out with the thing. Oh, because I wanted to add some Indigenous language. I wanted to have him say something like under his breath that would be, representative of something that would be said in the Anishinaabe language, given that context. Mm-hmm. And in the end, we didn't make it happen, so we didn't make it happen. But point is, there were family members out there who were absolutely willing to talk about his legacy and then share more information with us to help us kind of put the book forward.
Beautiful. I think that's fantastic. And one thing that just from everything I've read and researched myself, just out of personal interest, especially with Canadian history, like I've read Moonshots Volume 1 and 2, The Outside Circle, and a number of other books. And actually, at the FANEXPO you guys were at, I got to have Moonshots signed Volumes 1 and 2 by the editor. So when I've looked into this, because I find it interesting, as a culture, from what I understand of it, and again, I don't have any degrees or anything like that, but they're a people of storytelling, culturally. Like, that is what they do. They tell each other stories. They don't write a lot down. They don't, they don't have scripture and stuff. So it was all stories. And I just thought that the medium of comics was probably the perfect way to tell a story for Indigenous people, or by Indigenous people. So I wanted to know, what was some of the feedback you got because of our medium, and just sort of in general, that really helped inform you? And is there anything in the book currently that would not have been if you didn't reach out?
It was interesting. So originally, I had, so Francis carries an Ojibwe war club on his back and uses it in his melee and activity and his battles. And that was something that, one, I had wanted to add to the book because, one, it lends itself very well to an action-adventure series to have like a hand-to-hand weapon. Also, trench fighting, it's very historical. Trench fighting, the amount of different weaponry that people did use in those situations is kind of astounding and scary, and very much what you could do and traditional, like we're talking like maces, like medieval, like there's been a whole bunch of stuff that is very odd, or at least things that we wouldn't expect in a early 20th century battleground, I suppose, as used in those situations. And so there was some feedback about, or confusion about, why would he carry one? And then I kind of explained, this is what I think would be the context for it, and given what we were seeing with trench fighting, and so that was something that they just had questions over, but then thought it was fine in the end. And they did like that it was a traditional Anishinaabe weapon as well that was used, and we use it in the book to do what it. I mean, as a weapon, like it's really like a bone breaking kind of type of weapon, and so we use it to good effect in the book to do like it really like incapacitating, not like necessarily killing, but like knocking people out and shattering wrists and those kinds of things, which is what it traditionally was used for. So. Anyway, but aside from that, no, not a whole lot that I can remember. But certainly just some dialogue, some little tweaks there, as I mentioned, with the candy store piece, and just some confirmation of what his context would have been, and so we can kind of as he grew up, and so we could kind of add those pieces.
Beautiful. And you mentioned it earlier about wanting a little bit of the language in the book. I read in one of the earlier interviews that you guys were sort of looking for a French translator for, well, obvious reasons, as well as Anishinaabe. Have you by chance found one yet? I mean, I appreciate it's probably not that easy, because I wouldn't even know how to begin that search. Yeah.
We've looked like anecdotally a little here and there, and then for us, we also have to prioritize the pieces that we're doing. So getting like the trade finished has been a priority for a few years now, right? Has been a priority for a few years. And, now we've got some boxes of books we've got to sell. And this idea of, we need to make another printing in another language. We're both like passionate that we want to get that done. We both want every Canadian to be able to read Group of Seven if they so desire. But it hasn't been like, it's not the next thing that I'm, or that Chris is doing. I'm a little scared to print it in another language and then get stuck with more copies of the book that we can only sell, to smaller communities. Given that we right now can't go to shows and we can't travel, we haven't heard any demand from readers for another language yet, except from teachers. There were teachers that had mentioned they wanted a French copy for the classroom for French schools, and that was on our mind. And we are a couple of months away from getting our book in front of the faces of the eyes of teachers in Ontario. So when that happens, we'll have a better sense of what the market actually is, and then how much we actually need to produce, and how much demand is out there. So it's on our mind all the time. But you're right, it's something that we have yet to achieve. It's one of the goals still on our list. But we're getting closer as we get closer to the school. The school piece.
Beautiful. And honestly, like I said, I myself have no idea how I would begin that process. But the fact that it's actually on your mind and you're not just like, you know what, we made our book, we've got our trade paperback, we'll just get that out and make our new comic. The fact that you're actually cognizant and going, you know what, how would we do that? Do we have the demand for it? Because you do have to be smart. I mean, you're in a business, you've made a product, you're trying to sell it.
Right.
I think that's wonderful. And I do hope that come the school year or whatever, you guys find that kind of demand, because I think it'd be great to have it, English, French, and any other languages that might work out for you.
Right. It would be wonderful. I'm just, for me, it's like I also see the workload of me being the one that has to reword every single page from scratch. In French, I can read at a high school level, and that's the only other language I can read. So it would be I'm either handing over files and we're paying someone else to do it, or it falls on the team of Chris and I. So I just see work, which I don't mind doing. I do love working, so it's cool. But knowing that there is, again, like there's demand for that product, with money behind it, really helps incentivize the hours of work that it will take to get it done, knowing that it's going to help fund the project and move us to the next issue, and to the next issue, to the next issue. Yeah. By the way,